In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where civilizations rise and fall like waves upon cosmic shores, there exists a truth that few dare to acknowledge. Underestimating humanity is the gravest mistake any species can make. King Zephyros of the Valtharian Empire learned this lesson the hard way. Standing 8 feet tall, with crystalline skin that refracted light like living diamonds, he ruled over 17 star systems and commanded fleets that could glass entire worlds. His laughter echoed through the marble halls of his palace when human ambassadors first approached his throne, their primitive ships barely capable of faster-than-light travel. These creatures, he had said, his voice like grinding stone, dare to call themselves a space-faring civilization. What Zephyros didn't understand was that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their numbers. It was something far more dangerous, something that had allowed them to crawl from the primordial mud of Earth and reach for the stars despite every obstacle the universe threw at them. It was their refusal to stay down when knocked to the ground. The alien king's laughter would soon turn to silence, and his empire's arrogance would crumble before a force he never saw coming. The indomitable human spirit wrapped in flesh that refused to break, minds that turned every setback into a stepping stone, and hearts that burned with a fire that could forge legends from the ashes of defeat. This is the story of how the mightiest empire in the known galaxy learned why you should never, ever underestimate the species that calls itself human. The crystal spires of Valthara Prime pierced the purple clouds like frozen lightning, their surfaces catching and scattering the light of 3 suns in patterns that would have driven lesser beings mad with their beauty. At the heart of this architectural marvel stood the Palace of Eternal Dominion, where King Zephyros held court over an empire that stretched across 17 star systems and encompassed over 200 billion souls. The throne room itself was a testament to Valtharian superiority. Hewn from a single massive geode, the chamber rose 300 feet into a crystalline dome that focused starlight into concentrated beams of pure energy. These beams danced across the walls in hypnotic patterns, telling the story of conquest after conquest, of species brought to heel beneath the might of the Valtharian war machine. King Zephyros sat upon his throne of living crystal, his 8-foot frame draped in robes woven from the silk of creatures that existed only in the deepest reaches of space. His skin, translucent and diamond-hard, refracted the chamber's light into prismatic cascades that painted rainbows across the polished floor. 6 eyes, arranged in perfect symmetry across his elongated skull, gazed down at the small delegation that had dared to request an audience. The humans looked pathetic by comparison. Their leader, a woman named Admiral Sarah Chun, stood barely 5.5 feet tall. Her dark hair was streaked with premature gray, and her uniform, while clean and pressed, bore the simple insignia of what they called the United Earth Defense Force. Behind her stood 2 other humans, a man with weathered features who introduced himself as Captain Marcus Webb, and a younger woman, Dr. Elena Vasquez, whose nervous fidgeting had already drawn snickers from several Valtharian courtiers. So, Zephyros began, his voice resonating through the chamber like grinding stone. These are the famous humans we have heard whispers about, the species that believes itself worthy of joining the Galactic Council. Admiral Chun stepped forward, her spine straight despite being surrounded by beings who could crush her with a casual thought. Your Majesty, we come seeking not membership but dialogue. Earth offers friendship and mutual. Zephyros raised one crystalline hand, and the human's words died in her throat. The king's 6 eyes focused on her with the intensity of stellar furnaces. Friendship. He leaned forward, and his courtiers began to chuckle. Tell me, little creature, what could your kind possibly offer to an empire such as mine? Dr. Vasquez stepped forward nervously. Our scientists have made remarkable advances in quantum computing, medical technology, and sustainable energy production. We've developed methods of quantum computing. Lord Thaxer, the king's chief advisor, interjected with a sound that might have been laughter if it hadn't been so cold. We mastered quantum entanglement while your species was still discovering fire. Medical technology? We conquered death itself millennia ago. Sustainable energy? He gestured toward the crystal dome above. We harvest the power of entire stars. The other courtiers joined in the laughter now, their crystalline voices creating a symphony of mockery that echoed through the vast chamber. Zephyros himself began to chuckle, a sound like boulders grinding together in an avalanche. Captain Webb's jaw tightened. Perhaps our technology isn't as advanced as yours, but nothing. Zephyros cut him off. You arrive in ships that barely qualify as interstellar vessels. Your weapons are primitive projectile throwers and explosive devices. Your lifespans are measured in mere decades, not millennia. Your bodies are soft, vulnerable, laughably weak. He stood from his throne, towering over the human delegation. Tell me, what right do such inferior beings have to stand in the presence of their betters? Admiral Chen's eyes flashed with something that Zephyros failed to recognize, something dangerous that had been forged in the crucible of a million human struggles. We may be smaller, weaker, and shorter-lived than you, your majesty. But we have something you clearly don't understand. And what, pray tell, is that? Resilience. The king's laughter boomed through the chamber. Resilience? Is that what you call it when your kind dies of old age in less than a century? When a single energy blast can vaporize dozens of you? When your homeworld is so fragile that a moderate change in temperature could kill billions? No, Admiral Chen said quietly. I call it resilience when we refuse to give up despite those odds. When we keep pushing forward no matter how many times we're knocked down. When we turn our weaknesses into strengths and find ways to win that no one expects. The courtiers were laughing openly now, their crystalline forms shimmering with mirth. Even the guards at the chamber's entrances had begun to chuckle at the human's audacity. Zephyros wiped what might have been tears from two of his eyes. Oh, this is rich. The soft little creatures think their stubborn refusal to accept reality is somehow admirable. He gestured dismissively. Guards, escort these beings back to their ships. And make sure they understand that their friendship is neither wanted nor needed here. As the Valtharian guards moved forward, Admiral Chun held her ground. You're making a mistake, your majesty. The only mistake, Zephyros replied, would be wasting any more time on your pathetic species. Gudbia, humans. Try not to extinct yourselves on the way home. The guards herded the three humans out of the throne room while the courtiers continued their laughter. As their footsteps echoed down the crystal corridors, Zephyros settled back onto his throne with satisfaction. Really, the audacity of these creatures was almost amusing. Did they truly believe that their resilience could somehow compensate for the vast gulf between their capabilities and those of a superior civilization? Lord Thaxter approached the throne, his expression still bright with amusement. Shall I have our fleets monitor their departure, my king? Ensure they don't try any desperate gestures? No need. Zephyros waved dismissively. What could they possibly do? Their entire military probably couldn't scratch the paint on a single one of our dreadnoughts. He paused, considering. Although, perhaps we should keep an eye on their star system. If they become too much of a nuisance, we can always add Earth to our collection of conquered worlds. As you wish, my king. Though I hardly think such primitive beings warrant the effort of conquest. Perhaps we should simply ignore them until they inevitably destroy themselves. Zephyros nodded sagely. Wise words, old friend. After all, what threat could such weak, short-lived creatures possibly pose to the mighty Valtharian Empire? Meanwhile, aboard the human vessel Defiance as it departed Valtharian space, Admiral Chen stood on the bridge staring out at the stars. Her face showed no emotion, but her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. Captain Webb approached her cautiously. Admiral, what are our orders? Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but carried an edge that could cut diamond. Set course for Earth, Captain. Maximum speed. Yes, ma'am. And then? Admiral Chun turned from the viewport, and Webb saw something in her eyes that made him take an involuntary step back. It was the same look he'd seen in the eyes of soldiers who had watched their friends die, who had been pushed beyond their breaking point, and discovered that their breaking point was much further than anyone had imagined. Then, we show King Zephyros exactly what human resilience looks like. Dr. Vasquez, who had been monitoring communications, looked up from her station. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the Valtharian fleet. They're moving to intercept something in the Rigel system." "The hegemony?" Webb asked. "Looks like it. The Drachmary are making another push against Valtharian territory." Shin nodded slowly. The Drachmary hegemony had been at war with the Valtharian Empire for over 50 years, ever since a dispute over mining rights in the Horsehead Nebula had escalated into full-scale conflict. It was a brutal, grinding war between two highly advanced civilizations, with casualties measured in the billions. "Interesting timing," Chen murmured. "Admiral?" Vasquez looked confused. "Oh, nothing, Doctor. Just thinking about opportunities." Chen smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Captain Webb, once we reach Earth, I want you to contact Admiral Harrison immediately. Tell him we need to convene an emergency session of the Defense Council." "And what should I tell them the meeting is about?" Admiral Chun turned back to the viewport, watching the stars stream past as they jumped to hyperspace. In the distance, she could see the glow of weapons fire as Valtharian and Drachmary fleets clashed in the void. "Tell them it's about showing an alien king the difference between strength and power, and why you should never, ever underestimate humanity's capacity for adaptation." As the Defiance streaked through hyperspace toward Earth, none of its crew could have imagined the chain of events they were about to set in motion. They had been dismissed, mocked, and humiliated by an alien king who saw them as nothing more than primitive animals pretending at civilization. But they were human, and humans had never been very good at staying in their place. In the vast darkness of space, where empires rose and fell like cosmic tides, a small blue world began to prepare for war. Not the kind of war that Zephyros understood, a clash of mighty fleets and overwhelming firepower, but something far more dangerous. The kind of war that humans excelled at. The kind of war where the underdog refused to stay down, no matter how hard they were hit. Where cleverness mattered more than strength. Where adaptation was more valuable than raw power. And where the will to keep fighting could overcome seemingly impossible odds. King Zephyros had laughed at humanity's weakness. He was about to learn why that laughter would be the greatest mistake of his very long life. 3 months after the humiliating audience with King Zephyros, the orbital defense platforms around Earth hummed with unprecedented activity. What had once been a modest collection of early warning satellites and defensive installations had transformed into something that would have made the galaxy's military strategists take notice if they had known to look. Admiral Sarah Chun stood in the command center of Olympus Station, Earth's primary military coordination hub, watching streams of data flow across holographic displays that painted the solar system in 3 dimensions. Ships moved between planets like industrious ants, carrying cargo that wasn't listed on any official manifest. Construction crews worked around the clock on projects that didn't appear in any public database. And in the deepest, most secure laboratories on Earth and Mars, scientists pushed the boundaries of human ingenuity with a desperation that bordered on madness. Status report. Chun commanded as she approached the Central Command Console, where Admiral Harrison, the weathered leader of Earth's defense forces, was coordinating with representatives from every major nation and colony. Harrison looked up, his face grim but determined. The Koreans delivered the last batch of quantum processors yesterday. The Japanese fusion cores are operating at 112% efficiency. Their engineers insist they can push it to 120 without catastrophic failure. The Russians have somehow managed to increase the yield on their antimatter containment systems by 30%. The Germans? Chen asked. Their new alloy compounds are performing beyond all projections. Apparently, when you tell German metallurgists that the fate of humanity depends on creating materials that shouldn't exist, they take it as a personal challenge. Harrison's lips quirked upward slightly. The Americans are being typically American about the whole thing, which means they've thrown every regulation, safety protocol, and environmental concern out the window and are building things that technically violate several laws of physics. The good news is they're ahead of schedule. The bad news is nobody knows if their new weapons will work or accidentally create a black hole. Dr. Elena Vasquez hurried over to them, her arms full of data tablets, and her face flushed with exhaustion and excitement. Admiral Chun, you need to see this. The theoretical models are confirmed. We can do it. Chun took the tablet and scrolled through dense columns of calculations, energy projections, and probability matrices. What she saw there made her catch her breath. Are you certain? We've run the simulations 17,000 times. The margin of error is less than 2%. Vasquez's eyes were bright with the fever of discovery. It'll require everything we're building, and we'll only get one shot, but yes, it can work. Captain Marcus Webb approached from the communications section, his expression troubled. Admiral, we're receiving intelligence updates from our deep space monitoring stations. The war between the Valtharians and the Drachmarie is escalating. Both sides have committed their reserve fleets to the Rigel offensive. Shin nodded. She had been monitoring the war carefully, watching as two ancient civilizations ground each other down in a battle of attrition that had consumed entire star systems. To most observers, it was a tragic waste of life and resources. To Admiral Chun, it was opportunity. Current force projections? She asked. Webb consulted his datapad. Combined, both empires have committed roughly 80% of their total military assets to the Rigel sector. The Valtharians alone have moved 12 dreadnought battle groups out of their core systems, including forces that were originally stationed near Earth. Yes, ma'am. Our system is currently monitored by a single observation post and a patrol squadron of 4 light cruisers. Admiral Harrison frowned. That's still more firepower than our entire fleet could handle in a conventional engagement. Good thing we're not planning a conventional engagement, Chen replied. She turned to address the room. Ladies and gentlemen, how long until Project Lazarus is ready for implementation? The question brought sudden silence to the bustling command center. Project Lazarus was humanity's most closely guarded secret, a plan so audacious that even some of Earth's military leaders thought it bordered on insanity. Dr. Vasquez checked her data tablets. Final components will be in place within 72 hours. We're still waiting for the Australians to deliver the last of their gravitational field generators, and the Canadian zero-point energy modules need final calibration. The Martian shipyards? Chen asked, working around the clock. The Titan Industries fabrication complexes are producing components faster than we can assemble them. Harrison paused. Sarah, are we really going to do this? What we're planning, it's never been attempted on this scale. Hell, the theory didn't even exist until 6 months ago. Admiral Chun walked to the massive viewport that dominated one wall of the command center. Beyond the transparent aluminum, Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, looking deceptively peaceful. But appearances were deceiving. Humanity's homeworld had become a fortress, bristling with defensive systems that bent the laws of physics in ways that would have impressed even Valtharian scientists. Marcus, she said without turning around, show them the recording again. Captain Webb nodded and activated the room's main holographic display. The image that appeared was one that every person in the command center had seen dozens of times, but it never failed to stir something primal in their chests. King Zephyros filled the display, his crystalline form radiant with arrogance as he towered over the human delegation. His voice echoed through the silent command center. Tell me, what right do such inferior beings have to stand in the presence of their betters? The recording continued, showing the alien king's laughter, the mockery of his courtiers, the dismissive wave that had sent humanity's ambassadors away like bothersome insects. When it ended, the command center remained silent for a long moment. That, Admiral Chun said quietly, is why we're going to do this. Not for conquest, not for resources, not even for revenge. We're going to do it because someone needs to teach the galaxy that strength isn't measured in the size of your ships or the power of your weapons. She turned back to face the room, and those present saw something in her eyes that made them understand why she had been chosen to lead humanity's most desperate gambit. We're going to do it because every species in this galaxy that has ever been dismissed, conquered, or enslaved by a superior force deserves to know that sometimes, just sometimes, David really can kill Goliath. Dr. Vasquez cleared her throat nervously. Admiral, there's something else. We've been monitoring Valtharian communications, and there are reports of unusual activity in their outer territories. What kind of unusual activity? Ships disappearing. Entire patrol squadrons vanishing without a trace. At first, they attributed it to Drachmarie raids, but the pattern doesn't match known hegemony tactics. She pulled up a star chart showing the Valtharian Empire's borders. Look at this. 7 separate incidents, all in systems that are considered strategically worthless. Chen studied the display. The missing ships were scattered across a wide area, with no apparent tactical significance. But there was something about the pattern that nagged at her. Webb, what do we know about the species that inhabit these regions? Mostly minor civilizations. The Ketheri in the Proximus sector, some Trilonian trade outposts, a few independent human colonies that were established before the Valtharians claimed the territory. He paused. Wait, human colonies? Apparently, some of our more adventurous colonists established settlements in these systems during the early expansion period, before we knew about the Valtharian Empire. Most were absorbed into the Empire as client states decades ago. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her calculations. Admiral, what if they weren't absorbed? What if some of those colonies managed to stay hidden? The question hung in the air like an electric charge. The idea that human settlements might exist beyond Earth's official borders was not unprecedented. Humanity's expansion into space had been chaotic and poorly coordinated in the early years. Some colony ships had simply disappeared into the void, their fates unknown. If there are human colonies out there, Admiral Harrison said slowly, and if they're the ones making Valtharian ships disappear, then we're not the only ones who've decided that aliens laughing at us is unacceptable, Chen finished. She smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Webb, I want you to establish communication with our deep space monitoring stations. Tell them to look for any signs of coordinated activity in those sectors. And if they find something, then we adjust Project Lazarus accordingly. If humanity has already begun showing the galaxy what we're capable of, then perhaps it's time we coordinated our efforts. As the command staff dispersed to their duties, Admiral Chun remained at the viewport, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, King Zephyros continued his war against the Drachmarie, secure in the knowledge that his empire was invincible. Somewhere out there, ancient alien civilizations battled for supremacy while dismissing humanity as irrelevant. They were all about to learn a lesson that humans had been teaching for millennia. Never count out the underdog. The next 72 hours would be critical. If Project Lazarus succeeded, humanity would announce itself to the galaxy in a way that no one could ignore. If it failed, Earth would likely be reduced to a lifeless cinder by Valtharian retribution. But Admiral Sarah Chun had not survived 30 years in Earth's defense forces by playing it safe. She had survived by understanding that sometimes, when faced with impossible odds, the only rational response was to attempt the impossible. The Valtharian Empire was about to discover why human beings had conquered their own world, reached for the stars, and refused to be cowed by any force in the universe, no matter how powerful it claimed to be. In the depths of space, ancient powers prepared for war while dismissing humanity as an irrelevant footnote in galactic history. They would learn otherwise soon enough. The countdown to humanity's debut on the galactic stage had begun, and Admiral Chun intended to make sure it was a performance that the universe would never forget. King Zephyros had laughed at human weakness. Soon, he would learn the difference between being weak and being underestimated, and that difference was about to reshape the galaxy forever. The first sign that something had changed in the galaxy came not as a dramatic explosion or a grand declaration, but as a simple mathematical impossibility that appeared on monitoring stations across three-star systems. The Valtharian observation, post-Eternal Vigil, had been tracking routine patrol movements in the outer territories when sensor technician Vilex noticed an anomaly in the quantum resonance readings. At first, he assumed it was equipment malfunction. The numbers his instruments were showing simply couldn't be correct. "Commander Thrinks," he called across the cramped observation deck, his voice tight with confusion. "I'm reading massive gravitational distortions in the Kepler 442 system." Commander Thrinks, a veteran of 40 years of military service, barely looked up from his tactical displays. "Probably another stellar flare. Those red dwarfs are notoriously unstable. Sir, with respect, this isn't stellar activity. The gravitational waves are artificial, and they're enormous." Vilex's crystalline skin began to shift color, cycling through confused purples and alarmed reds. "Sir, according to these readings, someone just moved a moon." Now, Thrinks paid attention. He strode across the observation deck, his massive frame causing the deck plating to vibrate with each step. When he looked at Vilex's sensor display, his 6 eyes widened in disbelief. "That's impossible. No civilization has the technology to move celestial bodies on that scale. Not even us." "Yes, sir. That's what I thought too. But I've run the calculations 17 times. Someone has artificially displaced Kepler 442c by approximately 2,000 kilometers from its original orbit." Thrinks was about to dismiss the readings as a sensor malfunction when another voice called out from across the observation deck. "Commander, I'm detecting similar distortions in the Wolf 1061 system and Gliese 581. Sensor technician Zara's voice carried a note of panic that 30 years of Valtharian military discipline couldn't entirely suppress. "Sir, someone is moving planets." The next 12 hours brought reports that defied explanation. Across 17 different star systems, moons have been shifted into new orbits, asteroid belts have been reorganized into geometric patterns, and, in 3 cases, small planets have been moved with surgical precision to create gravitational resonances that amplified quantum field effects by several orders of magnitude. When the reports reached King Zephyros on Valthra Prime, he initially assumed they were the result of some new Drachmary superweapon. The timing seemed too convenient. Just as his forces were gaining the upper hand in the Rigel offensive, a mysterious new player had entered the game. "My king." Lord Thaxter approached the throne with the careful steps of someone delivering news he knew would be unwelcome. "Our intelligence networks have confirmed the reports. Someone is conducting massive stellar engineering projects throughout our outer territories." Zephyros leaned forward, his crystalline features catching the light of the palace's energy matrices. "The Drachmary? That was our initial assessment, but the evidence doesn't support that conclusion. These operations are occurring simultaneously across multiple sectors, far from any known hegemony presence. And the scale?" Thaxter paused, consulting the data tablet in his hands. "My king, whoever is doing this has technology that exceeds our capabilities in several key areas. Impossible Zephyros n'aped. The Valtharian Empire is the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. Our mastery of gravitational manipulation is unmatched." "Yes, my king. Which is why these reports are so disturbing. According to our analysis, the gravitational field generators being used would require power sources equivalent to the output of an entire star. No known civilization possesses such technology." Zephyros stood from his throne, pacing across the crystal floor with movements that sent prismatic light dancing across the chamber walls. "Have we established communication with whoever is responsible for these actions?" "We have tried, my king. All attempts at contact have been ignored." "However," Thaxter hesitated. "Speak." "Our deep space reconnaissance has detected energy signatures consistent with human technology in several of the affected systems." The king stopped pacing. "Humans?" "Yes, my king. The same primitive species that sought an audience with you 3 months ago. But that's impossible, of course. Human technology is centuries behind our own. They couldn't possibly have developed stellar engineering capabilities in such a short time. Zephyros considered this information. The idea that the pathetic creatures he had dismissed so casually could be responsible for such displays of technological prowess was absurd. And yet, recall Battle Group Epsilon from the Rigel Offensive, he commanded. I want them to investigate these disturbances personally. My king, withdrawing forces from the Rigel sector could jeopardize our current advantage against the Drachmary. Do it anyway. If someone is conducting unauthorized activities in our territory, they will learn the price of challenging Valtharian authority. Battle Group Epsilon consisted of 3 Dreadnought-class warships, each one a masterpiece of Valtharian engineering capable of reducing continents to molten slag. Their commander, Admiral Corex, had spent 2 centuries perfecting the art of subjugating inferior species. When he received his orders to investigate the stellar engineering incidents, he looked forward to adding another conquered civilization to his collection. The battle group's first stop was the Kepler 442 system, where the mysterious gravitational distortions had first been detected. What Admiral Corex found there challenged everything he thought he understood about galactic civilization. The system's second planet, previously a barren rock with no strategic value, had been transformed into something unprecedented. Its moon had been moved into a precise orbit that created standing gravitational waves, turning the entire planetary system into a massive quantum resonance chamber. The engineering required for such a feat was staggering, and the implications were terrifying. Sir, reported Commander Taziel from the sensor station, I'm detecting massive artificial structures on the planet's surface. They appear to be some kind of industrial complex. Visual confirmation, Admiral Corex ordered. The main display activated, showing the surface of Kepler 442c in high resolution. What they saw there made even veteran Valtharian officers gasp in astonishment. The planet's entire surface had been converted into a single, vast manufacturing facility. Kilometers-high towers stretched toward the sky, connected by transportation networks that defied conventional physics. Energy conduits the size of city blocks carried power from fusion reactors that burned with the intensity of miniature stars. And everywhere, moving with purposeful efficiency, were construction drones unlike anything in Valtharian databases. Those aren't Drachmary designs, Commander Taziel observed. The technology appears to be primitive, but scaled up beyond all reason. Admiral Corex studied the display. The individual components he could see were indeed relatively simple. Fusion reactors, gravitational manipulators, quantum field generators. But they had been assembled into systems of unprecedented scale and complexity. It was as if someone had taken basic technologies and applied them with an absolutely reckless disregard for conventional limitations. Sir, I'm detecting incoming transmissions. Multiple sources all across the system. From the planet? No, sir. From everywhere else. The tactical display updated, showing contacts throughout the Kepler 442 system. What had appeared to be empty space was suddenly revealed to be teeming with activity. Ships emerged from stealth fields, revealing themselves to be of a design that no Valtharian database could identify. They were ugly, brutal things, angular constructions of metal and ceramic that looked more like industrial equipment than warships. They bore no artistic embellishments, no elegant curves or aesthetic refinements. They were purely functional, built with the kind of pragmatic ruthlessness that suggested their creators cared nothing for beauty and everything for effectiveness. Sir, Commander Taziel's voice carried a note of disbelief. I count over 300 vessels. Frigate to Dreadnought class, all of unknown configuration. Admiral Corex felt a chill run through his crystalline core. 300 ships was a significant fleet by any standard, but their sudden appearance meant that someone had been operating in Valtharian space for months without detection. That should have been impossible. Open communication channels. Demand identification. The response came not as words, but as a data transmission that bypassed Valtharian communication protocols entirely. When translated, it consisted of a single message repeated in 17 different languages, including several that the Valtharian computers couldn't identify. This is Admiral Sarachun of the United Earth Defense Force. You are operating in human space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Admiral Corex's laughter boomed across the bridge. Human space? These primitives claim this system as their own. He activated the ship's main communication array. This is Admiral Corex of the Valtharian Imperial Navy. You will surrender immediately and submit to Imperial authority. Any resistance will be met with the complete destruction of your forces. The response came faster than expected, and it wasn't transmitted through communication channels. It was transmitted through weapons fire. The human ships opened fire simultaneously, and what struck the Valtharian battle group wasn't energy beams or plasma bolts, but something far more unsettling. Projectiles that moved at significant fractions of the speed of light, each one carrying enough kinetic energy to crack a moon in half. The first salvo struck Admiral Corex's flagship before his shields could fully activate. The projectiles, simple slugs of ultra-dense matter, punched through Valtharian deflector screens as if they weren't there. The ship's crystal hull, designed to withstand direct hits from plasma cannons, shattered like glass under the kinetic impact. Impossible, Corex gasped as a ship shuddered around him. No projectile weapon can penetrate our shielding. Sir, damage report, Commander Taziel called out over the alarm klaxons. Hull breaches on decks 40 through 60. The port gravitational array is offline. And, sir, these projectiles are accelerating. They're not following ballistic trajectories. The second salvo arrived before Corex could process this information. This time, the projectiles split into submunitions just before impact, each fragment guided by its own targeting system. The Valtharian flagship, a vessel that had conquered a dozen worlds, was suddenly struggling to survive against weapons that shouldn't have been able to threaten it. Return fire, Corex roared. All ships engage the enemy. The Valtharian response was swift and terrible. Energy beams that could vaporize asteroids lanced out toward the human fleet, each shot carrying enough power to level cities. Plasma torpedoes that burned hotter than stellar cores streaked across space, seeking targets with the inexorable hunger of guided destruction. The human ships responded by doing something that no Valtharian tactical manual had ever contemplated. They scattered, but not randomly. Each vessel moved in perfect coordination with dozens of others, creating a three-dimensional dance of evasion that made targeting nearly impossible. They used the system's gravitational fields as slingshots, accelerating to velocities that strained the limits of physics while somehow maintaining formation coherence. And they kept shooting. Admiral Corex watched in growing horror as his battle group, three of the most powerful warships in the Valtharian fleet, was systematically torn apart by weapons that belonged in a museum. The human projectiles were crude, simple, almost primitive. But there were so many of them, moving so fast, guided with such precision, that Valtharian defenses couldn't cope with the sheer volume of incoming fire. Sir, the Eternal Glory is reporting critical damage. The Starfire Ascendant has lost main power. Corex's ship lurched as another salvo found its mark. Through the crystal dome of his bridge, he could see debris from his own fleet spinning away into space. Retreat, he commanded, the word tasting like poison in his mouth. All ships, withdraw to hyperspace. As the remnants of Battle Group Epsilon limped away from the Kepler 442 system, Admiral Corex found himself faced with a reality that challenged everything he thought he knew about warfare, technology, and the natural order of the galaxy. The humans, those same pathetic creatures that King Zephyros had dismissed with laughter, had just defeated a Valtharian battle group using weapons that were theoretically obsolete. It should have been impossible. By every metric of technological advancement, the Valtharians were superior. Their ships were faster, their weapons more powerful, their defenses more sophisticated. But somehow, the humans had turned their primitive technology into something devastatingly effective. As his damaged flagship jumped to hyperspace, Admiral Corex began to understand what his king had failed to grasp during that audience 3 months ago. The humans hadn't been boasting about their resilience. They had been issuing a warning. A warning that the Valtharian Empire had foolishly chosen to ignore. And now, as reports of similar defeats began pouring in from across the outer territories, it became clear that humanity's response to King Zephyros's laughter was just beginning. The galaxy was about to learn that when humans said they were resilient, they weren't talking about their ability to endure hardship. They were talking about their ability to turn that hardship into strength. And they had just demonstrated that strength in the most definitive way possible, by making the impossible look easy. The emergency session of the Valtharian High Council convened in the pre-dawn hours of Valthera Prime's longest day, when the three suns cast the crystal spires of the capital in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. The council chamber, normally a place of measured debate and ceremonial grandeur, hummed with an undercurrent of panic that had not been felt in over 2 centuries. King Zephyros sat upon his throne of living crystal, his 6 eyes fixed on the holographic displays that surrounded him like accusing specters. Each display showed a different star system, and each system told the same impossible story: Valtharian forces retreating in defeat from encounters with human fleets. 17 battle groups, Lord Thaxer reported, his voice hollow with disbelief. 17 separate engagements across our outer territories. In every case, our forces were forced to withdraw after suffering catastrophic damage. Ow! The word escaped Zephyros like a grinding stone. How were these primitive creatures achieving this? Admiral Vextara, the Empire's highest-ranking military commander, stepped forward. Her crystalline form bore the scars of 1,000 battles, and her voice carried the authority of someone who had never known defeat. Until now, my king, we have analyzed the tactical data from every engagement. The humans are not defeating us through superior technology. They are defeating us through superior adaptation. She activated the chamber's main holographic display, showing a 3-dimensional recreation of the battle at Kepler 442. The brutal efficiency of the human attack played out in slow motion, each projectile tracked in devastating detail. Their weapons are indeed primitive by our standards. Kinetic projectiles, fusion warheads, electromagnetic pulse generators, technologies we mastered millennia ago. But they have combined these simple tools in ways that exploit fundamental weaknesses in our defensive systems. Zephyros leaned forward. Explain. Our shields are designed to deflect energy-based attacks. They are less effective against kinetic weapons, particularly ones moving at relativistic speeds. The humans appear to have recognized this limitation and developed weapons specifically designed to exploit it. One weakness, Lord Thaxer interjected. Surely our superior numbers and firepower can overcome. It's not just one weakness, Admiral Vextara cut him off. They have identified and exploited dozens of tactical vulnerabilities we didn't even know we had. Our ships are designed for stand-up fights between massive fleets. The humans refuse to engage that way. They attack from unexpected angles, use gravitational slingshots to achieve impossible velocities, and coordinate their movements with a precision that suggests they share some form of instantaneous communication. The display updated, showing a new recording from the battle at Wolf 1061. Valtharian forces had attempted to corner a human fleet near the system's outer planets, only to watch helplessly as the enemy ships used the planet's gravity wells to accelerate to velocities that made targeting nearly impossible. They fight like swarm insects, Admiral Vextara continued. No individual ship is particularly dangerous, but collectively they overwhelm our defensive systems through sheer coordination and unpredictability. Zephyros stood from his throne, pacing across the crystal floor with agitation that sent prismatic light cascading across the chamber walls. You're telling me that we, the Valtharian Empire, masters of 17 star systems, are being defeated by creatures using obsolete technology? Yes, my king, because they're not bound by our assumptions about how warfare should be conducted. The king's laughter filled the chamber, but it carried no humor now, only bitterness and growing rage. This is absurd. We have ships that can crack planets. We have weapons that can ignite stars. How can we possibly be losing to humans? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Zolith, the Empire's chief xenobiologist, stepped forward hesitantly. He was an old Valtharian, his crystalline skin dulled with age, and he rarely spoke in council sessions. But when he did speak, his words carried the weight of centuries of study. My king, if I may, I have been studying the recordings of our initial encounter with the human delegation. Admiral Chin specifically used the word resilience to describe her species' primary characteristic. So, I believe we misunderstood what she meant. Dr. Zolith activated a smaller display, showing biological and psychological profiles of various galactic species. When most civilizations speak of resilience, they refer to the ability to endure hardship. But human resilience appears to be something different entirely. The display showed comparative data, population growth rates, technological advancement curves, adaptation indices. In every category, humans scored far beyond what their technological level should have allowed. Human resilience is not passive endurance, my king. It is active adaptation. They do not simply survive challenges. They learn from them, modify their approach, and emerge stronger than before. It is an evolutionary trait that appears to be hardwired into their species at the genetic level. Zephyros stared at the data, his mind struggling to process the implications. You're saying they became stronger because we defeated them? Not defeated, my king. Dismissed. There is a critical difference. Dr. Zolith's voice grew more confident as he warmed to his subject. When you laughed at them, you gave them something more valuable than any alliance could provide. You gave them a clear understanding of their enemy's capabilities and mindset. The chamber fell silent as the full meaning of the xenobiologist's words sank in. They studied us, Admiral Vextara whispered. During those 3 months of silence, they were studying us. More than that, Dr. Zolith confirmed. They analyzed our technology, our tactics, our psychology. They identified every weakness, every blind spot, every assumption we make about warfare. And then they built their response around exploiting those vulnerabilities. Lord Thaxter's crystalline features had shifted to colors that indicated deep distress. My king, if this assessment is correct, then every engagement we fight will only make them stronger. They will learn from each battle, adapt their tactics, and become more effective. While we, Admiral Vextara added grimly, continue to rely on the same strategies that have served us for millennia. Strategies that are apparently obsolete against an enemy that refuses to fight the way we expect them to. King Zephyros stopped pacing. For the first time in his long life, he felt something he had never experienced before: genuine uncertainty. The Valtharian Empire had conquered its way across the galaxy by applying overwhelming force to enemies who fought according to predictable patterns. But how do you apply overwhelming force to an enemy that won't stand still long enough to be hit? Options, he commanded. We could withdraw our forces from the outer territories and consolidate our defenses around our core systems, suggested Lord Thaxter. Unacceptable. The Empire does not retreat. We could commit our entire fleet to a single, massive assault on their homeworld, Admiral Vextara offered. Overwhelm them before they can adapt. And if they have turned Earth into the same kind of fortress they've built in these outer systems? Dr. Zolith interjected. Our intelligence suggests that human industrial capacity has increased by several orders of magnitude in the past 3 months. Earth may be far more heavily defended than we assume. Zephyros considered this. The reports from the outer territories described human installations that defied conventional understanding. Entire planets converted into manufacturing centers, asteroid belts reorganized into defensive networks, moons repositioned to create gravitational weapon systems. If they had applied the same ruthless efficiency to defending their homeworld, there is another option, Dr. Zolith said carefully. Speak. Negotiation. The suggestion was met with stunned silence. The Valtharian Empire did not negotiate with inferior species. It commanded, and they obeyed. The idea of treating humans as equals was almost incomprehensible. You suggest we negotiate with primitives who dare to challenge imperial authority? Zephyros's voice carried a dangerous edge. My king, with respect, these primitives have just demonstrated that they can defeat our military forces. Perhaps it is time to reconsider our definition of primitive. Admiral Vextara nodded reluctantly. The humans have proven they can hurt us, my king. But they have not attempted to invade our territory or attack our civilian populations. Their actions appear to be defensive in nature. Defensive? Zephyros's laughter was bitter. They have seized control of 17 star systems. Systems we had classified as strategically worthless, Lord Thaxter pointed out. And, according to our intelligence, several of those systems contained hidden human colonies. It appears they were reclaiming what they considered to be their own territory. The king stared at the holographic displays, watching recordings of Valtharian ships limping away from battles they should have won easily. The evidence was undeniable. Humanity had revealed itself to be a force that could challenge the Empire's supremacy. But acknowledging that fact would require admitting that his dismissal of them had been a catastrophic error in judgment. My king, a new voice called from the chamber's communication array. We are receiving a transmission from the Sol system. It is addressed to you personally. Zephyros felt his crystalline core constrict. From Earth. Yes, my king. The transmission is from Admiral Chun. The chamber's main display activated, showing the same human woman who had stood before Zephyros's throne 3 months ago. But something had changed in her appearance. The uncertainty and deference were gone, replaced by the calm confidence of someone who held the stronger position in a negotiation. King Zephyros, Admiral Chun began, her voice carrying clearly across the vast distance between Earth and Valthara Prime. I believe it's time we spoke again. Behind her, the display showed a view that made every Valtharian in the chamber catch their breath. Earth hung in space, but it was no longer the simple blue world they remembered. Massive orbital installations surrounded it like a crown of steel and crystal. Their weapon arrays pointed toward the stars with unmistakable intent. In the distance, fleets of human warships moved in formation, their numbers impossible to count from the transmission's perspective. As I told you during our previous meeting, Chun continued, humanity values resilience above all else. You chose to interpret that as weakness. You were wrong. The display shifted to show battle footage from the outer territories, Valtharian ships retreating under overwhelming human fire, their proud formations scattered and broken. We have taken control of the territories you abandoned. We have built defenses you cannot overcome. We have demonstrated capabilities you did not think possible. Chun paused, and her expression grew almost sympathetic. But we are not your enemies, your majesty. We never were. Zephyros found himself leaning forward, despite his anger and humiliation. Humanity seeks what we have always sought, the right to exist without interference, to grow and explore according to our own nature, and to be treated with the respect due to any sentient species. Chen's voice grew firmer. We are prepared to coexist peacefully with the Valtharian Empire, but we will not bow to it. The transmission paused for a moment, and when it resumed, Admiral Chen's expression had hardened. You have 48 hours to respond to this offer of negotiation. If we do not hear from you by then, we will assume that you prefer to settle this matter through continued warfare. And I assure you, Your Majesty, that is not a path you want to pursue. The display showed brief images of human installations throughout the outer territories, weapons that beggar description, defensive systems that bent physics to their will, fleets of ships whose numbers seemed to grow with each passing day. Choose wisely, King Zephyros. This is the only offer of peace you will receive. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. King Zephyros stared at the empty display for a long moment, his mind reeling from the implications of what he had just witnessed. The humans were no longer seeking his permission to exist. They were offering him the chance to avoid a war that his own advisors believed the Empire might not win. For the first time in the proud history of the Valtharian Empire, they were being dictated to by what they had considered an inferior species. And the most galling part was that the humans were probably right. Accepting their offer was almost certainly the wisest course of action. But acknowledging that fact would mean admitting that his laughter had awakened something in humanity that should have been left sleeping. Something that had already begun to reshape the galaxy in ways no one could have predicted. The alien king who had laughed at human weakness now faced the consequences of that laughter. And those consequences were about to change everything. The 48 hours that followed Admiral Chen's ultimatum passed with the weight of eternity hanging over the Valtharian Empire. King Zephyros had not slept, had barely eaten, and had spent most of his time in the palace's highest tower, staring out at the star-filled void that had once seemed like his personal domain. The reports continued to pour in throughout those 2 days, each one painting a clearer picture of humanity's transformation. The outer territories were no longer contested space. They had become a fortress network of staggering complexity. Human fleets patrolled systems that had been empty just months before. Defensive installations that violated several theoretical limitations of physics had been constructed around strategic choke points. And still, the humans made no move toward Valtharian core systems. They were waiting. On the morning of the second day, as Valthera Prime's 3 suns painted the crystal spires in shades of amber and gold, King Zephyros made his decision. The throne room had been cleared of all but his most trusted advisors. Admiral Vextara stood at attention beside the crystal dais, her scarred form radiating tension despite her disciplined posture. Lord Thaxer clutched data tablets that contained contingency plans for everything from negotiation to total war. Dr. Zalith waited near the communication array, his ancient features grave with the weight of historical significance. "Open a channel to Earth," Zephyros commanded. The holographic display activated, and once again Admiral Chun appeared before the Valtharian throne. But this time, she was not alone. Behind her stood representatives from across human space. Military officers, political leaders, scientists, and others whose faces bore the determined expressions of a species that had chosen to forge its own destiny. "Admiral Chun," Zephyros began, his voice carefully controlled, "I have considered your proposal." And the king paused, understanding that his next words would either secure peace between their civilizations or condemn them to a war that would reshape the galaxy. Pride warred with pragmatism in his crystalline core, and, for a moment, the weight of his empire's history seemed to rest upon his shoulders. The Valtharian Empire is prepared to recognize humanity's sovereignty over the territories you have claimed. A collective exhale seemed to ripple through the human delegation, though Admiral Chen's expression remained neutral. However, Zephyros continued, "This recognition comes with conditions." Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. "State them." "First, humanity will not interfere with Valtharian operations in our recognized territory. Second, any future human expansion will be negotiated through proper diplomatic channels. Third," Zephyros hesitated, then pressed forward, "you will provide us with an explanation of how you achieved such rapid technological advancement." Admiral Chun was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a note of something that might have been amusement. "Your Majesty, you're still thinking like an empire that conquered its way across the galaxy. You're trying to negotiate from a position of strength you no longer possess." The words hit Zephyros like physical blows. "I beg your pardon? Let me clarify the situation for you," Chen continued. "Humanity is not seeking your permission to exist. We are offering you the opportunity to coexist peacefully with us. The difference is significant." Behind Chun, one of the other humans, a man with graying hair and the insignia of a general, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, while you've been deliberating, we've received communications from 14 other galactic civilizations. They've all expressed interest in establishing diplomatic relations with humanity. Zephyros felt his crystalline core constrict. 14 civilizations, including, Admiral Chen added, several client states of the Valtharian Empire who are apparently reconsidering their political allegiances. It seems that news of our recent achievements has spread throughout the galaxy. The implications of this statement struck the king like a stellar flare. If client civilizations were questioning their loyalty to the Empire, if other powers were seeking to align themselves with humanity. What do you want? Zephyros asked, his voice barely above a whisper. What we have always wanted, Chen replied. Respect, recognition, the right to determine our own path among the stars. She paused, and an acknowledgement that the age of galactic empires built on the subjugation of inferior species is coming to an end. Dr. Zalith stepped forward. Admiral, if I may ask, how did you achieve such rapid advancement? Our models suggested that human technological development would require centuries to reach your current level. Admiral Chen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Dr. Zalith, isn't it? We read your xenobiological assessments in the Imperial databases. Quite thorough, actually. You understood humanity better than your king did. She gestured toward the display behind her, which showed images of human installations throughout the outer territories. We didn't achieve rapid technological advancement, Doctor. We achieved rapid implementation of existing technologies. There's a significant difference. I don't understand. Humanity has always possessed the knowledge and capability to build what you've seen. What we lacked was the motivation to do so. Your king provided that motivation when he laughed at us and dismissed us as irrelevant. The display shifted to show construction footage from the past 3 months. Entire planetary surfaces being converted to manufacturing centers in a matter of weeks. Massive fleets being assembled with impossible speed. Defensive systems that would have taken the Valtharian Empire years to construct being completed in days. You see, Your Majesty, Chen continued, her attention returning to Zephyros. Humanity's greatest strength has never been our technology or our weapons. It has been our ability to accomplish the impossible when we're properly motivated. Admiral Vextareth spoke for the first time during the transmission. You're saying that everything you've built in the past 3 months, you could have built at any time? Given sufficient motivation and resources, yes. Humanity has a saying, Admiral, necessity is the mother of invention. When King Zephyros made it clear that our existence was considered irrelevant by the galactic community, we decided to prove him wrong. Zephyros finally found his voice again. By conquering 17 star systems? By demonstrating that we cannot be conquered, Chun corrected. There's a difference, Your Majesty. We have no interest in ruling over other species. But we will not be ruled by them either. The human general stepped forward again. Your Majesty, we're prepared to offer the Valtharian Empire a position in the new galactic order that humanity is establishing. But it will be as equals, not as the dominant power you once were. New galactic order? Lord Thaxter's voice cracked with shock. Admiral Chen nodded. The age of empires is over, Lord Thaxter. The civilizations of this galaxy are tired of bowing to species that claim superiority based on nothing more than technological advantage or military might. They want something different, a galactic community based on cooperation rather than conquest. The display behind her updated to show star charts marked with the territories of dozens of different civilizations. Many of them were former client states of major empires, now displaying independent territorial claims. Humanity is offering to serve as a neutral mediator in the establishment of this new order. We have no desire to rule over others, but we have demonstrated that we possess the capability to resist any attempt at conquest. Other civilizations find this reassuring. Zephyros stared at the display, watching his empire's influence crumble in real time. The client states he had taken for granted were declaring independence. The buffer zones that had protected his core systems were being reorganized by species that no longer feared Valtharian retribution. This is impossible, he whispered. No, Your Majesty, Chen replied gently. This is inevitable. The galaxy is changing, with or without your participation. The question is whether the Valtharian Empire wants to be part of that change or be left behind by it. The throne room fell silent except for the soft humming of crystal matrices that had powered Valtharian civilization for millennia. Zephyros looked around at his advisors, seeing his own shock and uncertainty reflected in their crystalline features. Admiral Vextara cleared her throat. Admiral Chun, what guarantee do we have that this new galactic order will honor our territorial integrity? The same guarantee that any civilization has, Chun replied. Your ability to defend what is yours. But the difference is that defense will no longer require conquest. In the new order, a civilization that remains within its borders and treats its neighbors with respect will be left alone. And those that don't, Dr. Zaleth asked. Chin's expression hardened. We'll discover what happens when they threaten humanity's friends. The threat was delivered so casually, so matter-of-factly, that it took a moment for its full implications to sink in. Humanity was not just offering to mediate the new galactic order. They were offering to enforce it. King Zephyros looked at the holographic display showing Earth's orbital defenses, at the fleets of human warships that had appeared seemingly overnight, at the evidence of technological capabilities that his own empire couldn't match. The choice before him was not really a choice at all. The Valtharian Empire accepts your proposal, he said finally. Admiral Chen nodded. Excellent. We'll begin drafting the formal agreements immediately. Dr. Zaleth, we'll be happy to share our technological data with your scientists. Not as tribute, but as part of the cooperation that will define the new galactic community. As the transmission ended, King Zephyros slumped back into his crystal throne. The empire he had inherited from his predecessors, built on the assumption of Valtharian superiority, was gone. In its place was something unprecedented, a galaxy where strength was measured not by one's ability to conquer others, but by one's ability to resist conquest. Lord Thaxer approached the throne hesitantly. My king, perhaps this change is for the best. We have spent centuries maintaining our empire through force. Perhaps now we can prosper through cooperation. Zephyros nodded slowly. Perhaps, but I cannot help but wonder what would have happened if we had simply accepted humanity's original offer of friendship. Admiral Vextara answered that question with the blunt honesty of a veteran military officer. We would have gained allies instead of creating enemies, my king, and the galaxy would have changed gradually instead of violently. Dr. Zaleth added his own observation. My king, I have been studying the patterns of human expansion over the past 3 months. Their growth has been strategic, not random. They have liberated oppressed populations, established trade networks, and created defensive alliances. They are building something that has never existed before. A galactic civilization based on voluntary cooperation rather than enforced submission. Zephyros considered this. Perhaps there was wisdom in accepting change rather than fighting it. Perhaps the age of empires truly was over, and something better was being born in its place. As night fell over Valthera Prime, the king who had laughed at human weakness stood at his palace windows, looking up at stars that no longer belonged to any single empire. Somewhere out there, humanity was reshaping the galaxy according to principles that he had never considered possible. They had been right about their resilience. They had been right about everything. King Zephyros had laughed at their weakness and paid the price, not in conquest or destruction, but in the humbling realization that true strength came not from the power to dominate others, but from the wisdom to stand as equals. The alien king's laughter had awakened humanity's potential, and that awakening had changed the galaxy forever. In the end, it was exactly what Admiral Chun had promised. Humanity had shown the universe what resilience really meant, and the universe would never be the same.